The cold does not announce itself with violence. It arrives first as a suggestion, brushing across the skin with a whisper, coaxing the breath into visible puffs, hinting at the vastness to come. For those approaching the settlements perched at the edge of the known world, the landscape seems almost unreal, an endless expanse of white, broken only by the faint outlines of jagged rock, frozen rivers, and low, squat dwellings that cling stubbornly to the frozen earth. The air itself feels different here, thinner, sharper, carrying a purity that bites at the throat and demands attention. As one draws nearer, the settlements appear not as buildings but as careful interruptions in the perfection of ice and snow. Each hut, rough-hewn and insulated with layered furs or earthen walls, stands like a patient sentinel against the wind. Smoke rises in hesitant plumes from small chimneys, curling upward and dissolving into the pale sky, a signal that life persists here despite the unforgiving conditions. There is no hurry in this place. The very pace of existence seems dictated by the rhythm of cold itself, by the subtle imperatives that ice and frost impose on every movement. Walking through the first snow-laden path, the senses are immediately occupied. The sharp, clean scent of frost-laden pine mingles with the acrid tang of burning wood from distant hearths. The snow underfoot gives slightly, then crunches, an almost meditative sound that punctuates each careful step. Even the act of breathing becomes a conscious ritual, drawing the cold deeply into the lungs and feeling it expand, a reminder that every breath is a negotiation with the environment. The eye strains to find depth in a landscape so uniformly white, and yet the human mind begins to map subtle contours. The rise of a hill, the dip of a frozen stream, the shadowed recesses where snow has gathered in silent drifts. The first encounter with the inhabitants is quiet, almost imperceptible. Figures move slowly, deliberately. A woman emerges from a low doorway, pulling a bundle of firewood, her movements measured against the wind. The weight of her task is obvious, yet she carries it with a practiced grace, a kind of intimate understanding of how to exist in this cold that is not learned in a single season. Eyes meet, not with haste but with the slow acknowledgement that life is here, steady and persistent. Children appear as small, swaddled forms, waddling in layers of furs, their presence a bright contrast to the muted world around them. Even in their play, there is an instinctive awareness of the cold's authority, careful movements that keep warmth contained and bodies safe. Sound behaves differently here. The snow absorbs most of it, leaving only the occasional crack of ice beneath a foot, the distant groan of a wind-stressed roof, or the muffled thump of a log against frozen ground. It is a silence that demands attention, a silence in which every small noise carries significance. A falling icicle, a snapping branch, or the soft rustle of furs as a villager adjusts a coat all become markers of presence in this otherwise hushed world. The ear learns to discern the difference between threatening sounds and those that are ordinary, mundane, even comforting. The settlements themselves are arranged with an intuitive understanding of survival. Buildings cluster for mutual protection, forming narrow lanes where snow does not drift as dangerously. Pathways are worn smooth by repeated travel, and the positioning of each hut considers the sun's brief arc, the prevailing wind, and the flow of water that might become impassable ice. Even without words, the layout speaks of generations of quiet observation, of people learning from each season and adjusting, incrementally, imperceptibly, to the demands of the frozen environment. At dusk, the cold deepens. Shadows lengthen, stretching across the snow like thin, blue rivers, and the wind rises in subtle swirls, brushing against faces and carrying the scent of distant forests or open plains. The light becomes softer, almost tactile, and one can sense the texture of the snow, powdery in some places, crusted and unyielding in others, a map of wind and temperature. The small fires within each dwelling gain prominence now, their warm glow spilling into the encroaching gray. Smoke drifts lazily, weaving through the low chimneys, the faint promise of heat against the vastness of cold. There is a rhythm to arrival itself, a pattern to how one comes into this world. First, the body registers the cold, then the eyes adjust to the muted light, the ears to the unusual stillness, and finally the mind begins to inhabit the space, to feel the patience, the enduring attention, and the small, deliberate movements that define life here. One notices the texture of snow on a windowsill, the way the light refracts through ice crystals, the faint, almost imperceptible groan of the earth under frost. Each detail is a lesson in awareness, a meditation in presence, as the settlement unfolds slowly before the observer. Even the approach of night carries a subtle drama. The horizon does not shift quickly but sags under the weight of long twilight, and the temperature seems to drop in a gradient so gentle that it is felt rather than measured. Windows glow faintly, revealing silhouettes of people engaged in quiet tasks, tending animals, repairing tools, or simply sitting beside fires, their faces illuminated by flickering warmth. The sound of the wind outside becomes more pronounced now, a reminder of the world beyond, yet within the settlements there is a contrasting softness, a gentle insistence that human life continues despite the vast cold. The arrival at the edge of the settlement is not a singular moment of triumph but a slow negotiation, a gradual understanding that to be here is to exist in quiet balance with forces larger than oneself. Each step, each breath, and each glance around carries with it the weight of observation and reflection. One notices the subtle signs of survival: smoke curling from chimneys, tracks in the snow, the careful stacking of firewood, and the faint warmth seeping from doorways. The settlement is not merely a place of habitation. It is a testament to patience, endurance, and the unspoken rhythms that govern life in the coldest corners of the earth. By the time night fully descends, the cold has become familiar, no longer an intruder but a constant companion. The wind hums low through the settlement, and the snow reflects pale starlight, turning the world into a serene, almost otherworldly tableau. Here, at the frozen edge of human habitation, life persists in quiet defiance, in deliberate, unhurried movements that speak of generations learning not to conquer the cold but to coexist with it. And as one prepares to rest beside the first fires, one begins to sense the depth of this endurance, that every breath, every motion, every faint glow in the distance is a small triumph over the silence and immensity of the frozen world. The cold, once noticed, demands an answer. It is not merely something to endure. It shapes every choice, every structure, every gesture. In these frozen settlements, survival begins with the buildings themselves, which rise from the snow like careful, deliberate interventions in the endless white. They are not grand constructions, but small, stubborn defenses, crafted over generations with a quiet wisdom that balances human need with the harshness of the environment. Each wall, each roof, each low doorway tells a story of adaptation, of observation, and of the patient labor that sustains life in the coldest corners of the earth. The materials themselves speak of resourcefulness. Timber is scarce, gathered from distant forests or drifted across frozen rivers, and each beam is chosen for both strength and density. Stone forms the foundation, often rough-hewn and layered with care to trap heat and resist the freeze-thaw of relentless winters. In some settlements, blocks of ice or hardened snow are used in walls or windbreaks, reinforced with mud, clay, or moss. The surfaces of the huts bear the marks of labor: tool gouges on beams, the uneven layering of stone, the subtle shifts of frost against walls. These are not mistakes but evidence of adaptation, the proof that survival requires attention to detail, a slow negotiation with the materials at hand. Entering a dwelling, the senses are immediately occupied. The air smells faintly of smoke, wood, and earth, warmed just enough to release subtle aromas that contrast with the cold beyond. Inside, the space is low-ceilinged, intimate, and carefully oriented. Windows, small and often covered with thin layers of animal hide or oil, allow the faintest light to filter through, a pale illumination that emphasizes textures rather than color. The floors may be packed earth, layered with straw, fur, or woven mats, each layer serving as insulation against the frozen ground beneath. Every element has been considered in relation to the cold. Low eaves to shelter from wind, thick walls to trap warmth, the precise placement of hearths to maximize heat throughout the dwelling. The hearth, always central, is more than a source of warmth. It is the heart of domestic life. Its smoke curls upward slowly, filling the room with the scent of burning wood and sometimes dried herbs or resin. The fire's glow casts long, flickering shadows on walls, revealing rough textures in stone and wood that would otherwise go unnoticed. Around this hearth, the inhabitants move with a measured grace, stoking embers, adding logs, adjusting stones that line the firebox. Each action is deliberate, almost ritualistic, a quiet choreography honed through countless repetitions. The fire is both companion and lifeline, a tactile reminder that survival depends on constant attention. Roofs are low and steep, built to shed snow quickly and reduce the risk of collapse. Each shingle, whether wood or bark, is carefully fitted, overlapping like scales to resist wind and frost. The snow accumulates and slides in small, predictable avalanches, a sound that punctuates otherwise silent days. Chimneys are narrow, often winding, to conserve heat while drawing smoke safely away. Observing them from outside, one notices the delicate curls of smoke, rising in soft, irregular patterns, betraying the presence of life within these frozen shelters. The settlement's layout itself is a form of architecture, a subtle response to the environment. Huts cluster together not by whim, but for shared protection against the wind and the cold. Narrow lanes reduce drifting snow, allowing movement between dwellings with less effort. The positioning of each building considers the sun's low arc, prevailing winds, and the flow of water, frozen or thawed. Even the smallest structures, sheds for storage, animal pens, or latrines, are sited with care, reflecting a continuous understanding of the forces that shape the land. This is architecture born of observation, of generations quietly negotiating with the elements. The textures inside the homes are rich with sensory detail. Walls may be lined with furs, reeds, or moss, each serving as insulation, each providing a subtle tactile comfort when brushed by hand. The smell of smoked meats or drying herbs mixes with wood and clay, a layering of domestic odors that marks the passage of time. Every object, from tools hung on walls to woven baskets, has a place, chosen to minimize exposure to cold and to maximize the efficiency of daily life. Even small imperfections, a crack in a stone, a sagging beam, tell the story of adaptation, of hands working in rhythm with the demands of the environment. Light is precious here, and its careful management shapes both the architecture and the mood. Faint daylight filters through small openings, creating shifting patterns across floors and walls. By late afternoon, the glow of oil lamps or firelight dominates, casting long shadows and imbuing the space with a warmth that is both physical and psychological. The interplay of light and shadow emphasizes textures, contours, and the small details of domestic life. A pot hanging above the hearth, a bundle of firewood tucked into a corner, the rough grain of a wooden table worn smooth by decades of use. Even in moments of quiet, the architecture interacts with the senses. Frost creeps along window edges, forming delicate patterns that catch the light. The walls, thick and uneven, hold the faint resonance of voices and footsteps, softening sounds rather than amplifying them. Outside, the wind howls, but inside there is stillness, a buffer created through careful construction and material knowledge. Every element of the buildings contributes to a sense of security, a subtle reassurance that life can persist despite the inhospitable surroundings. Architecture in these settlements is more than physical, it is an emotional landscape. Each dwelling, each lane, each hearth embodies patience, endurance, and the accumulated knowledge of those who came before. To live here is to inhabit this careful arrangement, to move slowly, to notice textures, temperatures, and the small signs of change in the frozen environment. The buildings themselves become partners in survival, shaping behavior, guiding routines, and sustaining a fragile equilibrium between human effort and the demands of nature. As night falls, the settlements settle into their own rhythm. Smoke continues to rise in faint tendrils, the glow of fires warms interiors and shadows deepen in corners where light does not reach. The cold presses against the walls, but inside the architecture holds, providing both protection and comfort. The sensory richness of these spaces, the smell of burning wood, the textures under fingertips, the muted warmth, the dim light, creates a slow, meditative rhythm that structures life itself. To dwell here is to learn the subtle art of coexistence, where every beam, stone, and hearth contributes to the quiet triumph of human endurance. By understanding the buildings, one begins to understand the people. Their patience, their meticulous attention, and their intimate relationship with the cold are mirrored in walls and roofs, in low doorways and narrow lanes. Survival is embedded not just in routines or tools, but in the very shape and texture of the environment they have shaped. The architecture becomes a silent teacher, demonstrating how life continues where most would despair, a testament to the quiet ingenuity and calm determination that define existence at the frozen edge. In the coldest settlements on Earth, warmth is more than comfort. It is the essence of life itself, a fragile thread linking the body to survival. Fire, small yet persistent, becomes the centerpiece of daily existence. Its arrival each day is not casual. It is a ritual, a deliberate act performed with the knowledge that each ember might be the difference between endurance and suffering. The morning begins with a careful approach to the hearth, the smell of cold air mixing with lingering smoke from the night before, the glow of embers faintly visible beneath ash. The first task is to awaken the fire. Fingers, numb from the frost that seeps through gloves and mittens, coax the coals back to life. A soft blow, careful placement of kindling, the delicate layering of small twigs over smoldering embers. The actions are slow, almost meditative, a precise choreography passed down over generations. The flames rise gradually, hesitant at first, flickering and sputtering, then gaining confidence as more fuel is added. The crackle begins, a sound that echoes softly against the walls, filling the space with life. Each spark, each snap of burning wood is a reassurance that warmth has returned, that the day may begin. There is a rhythm to these rituals, a gentle repetition that structures existence. Logs are stacked with care, arranged to allow air to flow, ensuring that the fire breathes steadily rather than choking. Ashes are shifted, coals moved, stones adjusted around the firebox to reflect heat into the room. The act of tending the fire is both practical and symbolic, a daily meditation on patience, attentiveness, and the fragile balance of survival. The warmth is tangible, radiating from hearth to walls, softening the frozen air, wrapping the body in comfort. The sensory details of fire extend beyond warmth. The scent of smoke, mingled with resin or dried herbs, hangs in the room, a reminder of the natural world preserved through human skill. The light plays across surfaces, illuminating textures, the rough grain of wooden beams, the uneven plaster of walls, the soft, worn furs layered for insulation. Shadows flicker, elongating and shrinking with the movement of flames, creating a quiet, hypnotic rhythm that encourages reflection and observation. Every flicker, every shift in light, is a subtle signal guiding attention to the delicate, interconnected details of domestic life. Fire is also a center of human interaction. Around the hearth, the inhabitants gather with deliberate slowness. Children, swaddled in furs, watch the flames, their small hands reaching toward the warmth without touching, learning early the careful boundaries that life here requires. Adults exchange tasks and words in measured tones, the sound absorbed partially by walls and snow, creating a hushed intimacy. Even silence is purposeful, a shared understanding of the fragility and preciousness of warmth. The hearth dictates the rhythm of the day, marking work, rest, and reflection in gentle intervals. Evening brings another layer to the ritual. The hearth must be fed carefully to last through the night. Flames are adjusted, embers piled strategically, and stones moved to retain heat. The smell of burning wood becomes richer, the smoke curling in slow, deliberate patterns, and the light softens into a quiet amber glow. The act is intimate, almost sacred, connecting the present with generations who performed the same movements. The warmth is no longer merely physical. It becomes emotional, a reassurance that life continues, that the cold outside is held at bay by the steady, patient labor of human hands. Small details of tending fire are endlessly significant. The choice of wood, resinous pine for quick heat, dense hardwood for long-lasting embers, reveals knowledge accumulated over years. The direction of a log, the layering of twigs, the spacing to encourage airflow, all are decisions made slowly, deliberately, and with awareness. A poorly tended fire is not merely inconvenient, it is dangerous. The cold penetrates quickly when heat falters, and the mind grows anxious as the body stiffens. These small, repeated acts, though quiet and unassuming, are vital, anchoring human life in a hostile world. There is also a quiet beauty to the fire rituals. Watching the flames rise, the sparks dancing briefly before fatting, the coals glowing like captured stars, one feels the intimate connection between human patience and the forces of nature. The fire obeys simple principles, yet within those constraints, the inhabitant negotiates a living pattern of energy, warmth, and light. It is a slow, almost hypnotic process, and the mind, observing, begins to align with the steady rhythm of the hearth. The cold outside fades in significance, replaced by the gentle insistence of heat and flame, and the awareness that survival is a series of small, mindful acts repeated day by day. The ritual extends beyond the interior of dwellings. In some settlements, outdoor fires are kindled to clear snow from pathways, to smoke food, or to provide warmth during brief communal gatherings. These fires are carefully managed, small and efficient, their smoke signaling life across the snowy landscape. The crackle carries farther in the silence of frozen air, and distant observers learn to interpret these signs. A newly lit fire might indicate the beginning of morning chores, the completion of a hunt, or the gathering of villagers for shared work. Even at a distance, the rituals of fire connect people to each other and to their environment, creating a subtle network of warmth and awareness. The morning, noon, and night cycles are punctuated by these rituals. Each day begins with the coaxing of embers. Each night ends with careful tending of the dying flames. Between these moments, the fire continues to be managed, small adjustments made as the day unfolds. Children learn to assist, elders pass down tips, and each person's attention to detail reinforces the community's resilience. These actions are so routine that they become almost subconscious, yet they retain an underlying intensity, a quiet vigilance that is essential for life in such extremes. Ultimately, the rituals of fire and warmth are a meditation in movement, a continuous dialogue between human ingenuity and the persistent cold. The flames are not only a practical solution, but a source of emotional steadiness, a gentle, ever-present companion. To tend fire in these settlements is to participate in a rhythm that predates memory, to join a lineage of quiet endurance. It teaches observation, patience, and attentiveness, qualities that define not only survival but the very character of life in the coldest places on Earth. By the time the day reaches its slow conclusion and the hearth burns steady against the approaching night, the inhabitant feels a subtle transformation. The cold, once oppressive and all-consuming, has been negotiated, restrained by careful labor and constant attention. The warmth, small but persistent, pervades body, mind, and home. It is not triumph in the dramatic sense, but a quiet mastery, an understanding that in this place, survival is measured in embers, in flickers of flame, in the delicate interplay between human effort and the elemental forces of the world. Here, life is rhythm and reflection, anchored in heat and light, moving slowly, deliberately, and with awareness. The rituals of fire and warmth, repeated countless times, become more than necessity. They become the pulse of the settlement, the quiet measure of existence, the gentle affirmation that life persists, even at the frozen edge of the world. In the settlements at the edge of the frozen world, survival is woven into every thread. Here, clothing is not decoration or status. It is armor, a vital barrier between life and the relentless cold. Each garment carries the weight of necessity, tradition, and accumulated knowledge. Layers are built slowly, with careful thought to materials, texture, and function, each one a deliberate shield against frost that bites with silent persistence. The morning begins with the ritual of dressing, a slow, methodical process. Bare hands tremble as they emerge from blankets or furs, briefly touching the chill air before retreating. Furs are wrapped around the body with precise folding, leather boots are laced with care, and mittens, thick and often stiff from cold, are adjusted until movement is possible. Every layer must be secure, every seam sealed against wind, every surface aligned to prevent heat from escaping. One becomes aware of the weight, the texture, and even the smell of the clothing. The faint musk of dried hides, the piney scent of tanned leather, the subtle stiffness of frozen wool. There is an intimate, almost tactile awareness required to dress properly. Layers must overlap exactly, joints protected, the neck and face partially covered. Gloves are tricky. Fingers must retain dexterity even as they are insulated against frostbite. Children, swaddled in multiple layers, waddle cautiously, learning early the rhythms of movement in heavy clothing. Elders, more practiced, perform the task efficiently but deliberately, mindful of small gaps where cold might seep through. Dressing is not rushed. It is a meditation, a conscious preparation for the long day ahead. Each material is chosen for its properties. Fur, thick and often from animals hunted in surrounding forests, is used against wind and frost. Wool and woven textiles are layered beneath, trapping warmth close to the skin. Leather provides durability, sealing the body against moisture and abrasions. Even the smallest items, a scarf, a hat, a collar of fur, are selected and positioned with care, each one tested against the biting air. The cold teaches attention. A misplaced layer can result in discomfort or even danger, and the inhabitants know this instinctively. The act of putting on clothing is itself a study in rhythm and sensation. Hands brush against the soft underfur, slide over stiffened leather, and adjust layers to sit correctly. The sound of boots creaking, of fabric rustling, accompanies each movement. The mind learns to notice even the smallest anomalies. A seam rubbing too tightly, a mitten that restricts movement, the chill that lingers at the back of the neck. These observations are internalized, becoming part of the body's memory, guiding future action in ways so subtle they become instinct. Beyond practicality, clothing shapes identity and community. Patterns, textures, and layering methods are often shared knowledge, passed down quietly through families and neighbors. A well-constructed coat is a testament not only to skill, but to understanding the land, the cold, and the rhythms of life within it. Each stitch is a dialogue between human experience and environmental necessity, a small act of communication that bridges generations. Even children begin to recognize quality in garments, learning to select and adjust pieces with the same deliberation they see in their elders. Clothing also serves as a sensory buffer against the environment. When the wind cuts across open plains or howls through narrow lanes, the layers hold heat and dampen the sting of frost. Snow falling from rooftops lands on fur and leather, forming temporary shields that melt gradually. Gloves and boots trap warmth, and even movement itself generates subtle heat, which is carefully retained through strategic layering. The body becomes a living archive of these techniques, responding automatically to the demands of cold and learning the rhythm of survival. Movement in clothing is measured and mindful. Walking through deep snow, adjusting layers, or bending to carry a log requires consideration of weight, flexibility, and insulation. The tactile experience is constant. The resistance of leather boots against frozen ground, the soft embrace of inner furs, the occasional chill when layers shift. Actions are deliberate. Haste risks exposure. Children observe, copying these rhythms slowly, internalizing a choreography of survival that is at once physical and psychological. Hats and hoods carry particular significance. The head loses heat quickly and covering it is essential. Hoods of fur lined with wool are drawn tightly around the face, leaving only eyes exposed. Scarves or wraps guard the neck and lower face, softening the sting of wind and ice. Even here, attention to detail is critical. Gaps allow cold to enter, moisture to form, and discomfort to escalate into danger. Adjustments are made continuously, small gestures repeated throughout the day, each one a conscious negotiation with the environment. Furs and layers also act as social indicators. The quality of preparation, the layering method, or the arrangement of garments subtly communicates experience, skill, and knowledge. The elder who moves confidently through the snow demonstrates expertise in dressing. The young apprentice learning to layer properly is recognized and guided. These visual cues, subtle and unspoken, create a shared understanding of survival skills within the community. The cold, in essence, shapes not only the body but the social fabric. The psychological impact of clothing cannot be overstated. A well-insulated body fosters calm and focus. A poorly dressed one breeds anxiety and distraction. Each layer becomes a talisman, a reassurance against the vast, indifferent cold beyond the walls of the settlement. The act of dressing is, therefore, as much a mental preparation as a physical one, aligning thoughts with the slow, deliberate pace required to navigate the frozen landscape. Even at rest, clothing remains integral. Furs are arranged around the body in beds, boots loosened but still nearby, hats and mittens within reach. Sleep is not a surrender to warmth but a continuation of careful attention, a recognition that the body must remain protected even as consciousness fades. The night is punctuated by small adjustments, the movement of layers in response to subtle drafts, the gentle shift of furs to maintain heat. These practices, repeated daily, become internalized rhythms, a silent dialogue between human body and environment. By the end of the day, clothing has done more than shield from the cold. It has shaped the inhabitants' experience of the world. Every step, every movement, every breath carries the imprint of careful preparation. Layers are worn as armor, not merely against weather, but against anxiety, exposure, and the unpredictable pressures of survival. They are a tactile embodiment of knowledge, patience, and the intimate understanding that in this frozen edge of the world, every thread, every stitch, and every fold matters. In these settlements, the human body is never naked to the elements. Clothing mediates the relationship between vulnerability and endurance, turning fragile flesh into a resilient vessel capable of navigating snow, ice, and wind. Each layer tells a story of observation, adaptation, and quiet ingenuity. The armor of furs, wool, and leather is more than protection. It is the rhythm of life, the meditation of movement, the invisible shield that allows human existence to persist where most would falter. Here, the cold is never truly defeated. It is negotiated, respected, and subtly tamed through layers, folds, and textures. And as the inhabitants move through their frozen world, they carry with them a sense of calm mastery, the deep reassurance that comes from understanding both the power of the environment and the quiet authority of their own preparation. Survival in this place is measured in layers, patience, and the intimate, deliberate rituals of dressing against the cold. In the coldest settlements on Earth, survival is not defined by grand gestures but by the quiet repetition of daily tasks. Each chore is deliberate, measured, and inextricably linked to the environment. The cold imposes a rhythm, slowing movements and sharpening awareness. Even the smallest action, a scoop of snow, a stroke of a broom, a careful placement of firewood, carries weight, demanding attention and patience. Life here is orchestrated in whispers of effort, a meditative negotiation with frost and wind. The morning begins before the sun fully rises, though in winter the distinction between night and day is subtle, almost imperceptible. Snow crunched underfoot as the first steps are taken outside, boots sinking slightly into the frost-hardened surface. Each movement is deliberate. Haste risks slipping or exposing flesh to biting cold. The air carries a sharp clarity, cold enough to sting the cheeks and make breath visible in clouds that linger for seconds before dissipating. Every small noise, the scrape of a shovel, the crack of frozen earth, the faint gusts of wind, is amplified in the surrounding stillness, punctuating the rhythm of the morning. One of the earliest chores is gathering water. Streams are frozen or partially obstructed by ice, requiring patience and careful technique. Holes are chipped into ice, water scooped with wooden buckets, and the fragile liquid transported back to dwellings without spilling. Hands, even with gloves, grow numb quickly. Each movement is calculated, measured. The cold seems to press against every surface, a constant reminder of the stakes. Yet there is a meditative quality to this task. The rhythm of scooping, carrying, and pouring creates a pattern that aligns body and mind, a slow, reflective engagement with necessity. Chopping wood follows, often in silence broken only by the crack of an axe against frozen logs and the occasional scrape of bark underfoot. Each piece is selected, struck, and split with attention to grain and density. The sound of wood fracturing is crisp in the still air, reverberating softly before fading into silence. Logs are stacked carefully, angled for stability, ready to fuel hearths that sustain warmth and life. The chore is repetitive, almost hypnotic, fostering a calm discipline. The body remembers each motion. The arc of the swing, the stance against uneven ground, the rhythm of splitting and stacking. In these movements, skill and survival converge, and the mind drifts into the quiet flow of repetition. Other tasks follow with similar precision. Roofs and walls are inspected for snow accumulation, repaired when necessary and reinforced with spare materials. Tools are cleaned, sharpened, and placed where they will be immediately accessible. Animal pens are tended, food is prepared, and supplies are checked, each action a subtle negotiation between the inhabitant and the demanding environment. Even minor chores, adjusting a door against drafts, shifting bedding, or brushing snow from furs, carry significance. Each task contributes to the fragile equilibrium of survival, emphasizing patience, observation, and subtle attentiveness. Silence dominates these daily routines. Conversation is sparse, measured, and often unnecessary. The cold itself seems to absorb sound, creating a quiet that heightens perception. In this environment, every noise, cracking ice, shifting logs, the soft thud of tools becomes amplified. The inhabitants move with awareness, adjusting their pace to the ambient stillness, their actions deliberate and unhurried. Even children, engaged in small tasks or observing adults, learn the value of silence, the rhythm of measured effort, and the reflective attention required to thrive in such extremes. There is also an intimate awareness of the body in these chores. Muscles respond to weight, balance, and resistance. Fingers adapt to gripping cold wood and tools. Feet adjust to the unpredictable surface of snow and ice. The cold tests endurance, but repeated tasks train resilience, creating a slow, internalized understanding of movement in this environment. Each chore becomes an embodiment of survival knowledge, a physical memory of what is required to maintain warmth, safety, and sustenance. Food preparation intertwines with chores, carrying its own sensory richness. Snow may be melted for cooking, frozen meat thawed just enough to work, and herbs or grains managed carefully to prevent spoilage. Each step is deliberate, slow, and exacting. The aroma of warming food begins to fill the home, mixing with the scent of wood smoke and the faint tang of frost. The senses are engaged constantly. Taste, smell, touch, and hearing all participate in the ongoing negotiation with cold and scarcity. Eating is both nourishment and ritual, the culmination of carefully executed labor. Attention to detail is paramount. A poorly stacked log pile may collapse under snow. A frozen stream misjudged may spill water over a frozen floor. A misaligned tool could shatter when pressure is applied. Inhabitants learn to anticipate, to notice subtle shifts in ice, wind, and frost. Their daily routines are informed by observation, creating an intimate dialogue with the environment. The chores are not burdensome. They are the rhythm of life itself, a slow, meditative structure that transforms cold and isolation into manageable, almost predictable patterns. Even the passage of time is embedded within these routines. Tasks follow the natural light and the subtle variations of temperature. Each chore is repeated, refined, and observed with patience. This repetition fosters both physical and mental endurance, and gradually, the inhabitants move through the day with an intimate familiarity, a quiet confidence in their ability to manage the frozen world. The monotony is deceptive. Within it lies the deep, attentive skill required to survive, to remain present, and to notice the details that make the difference between comfort and danger. By evening, the accumulated labor of the day begins to resonate through the settlement. Wood is stacked, water is secured, food is prepared, and tools are organized. Snow has been cleared and pathways are accessible. The soundscape remains hushed, punctuated by the soft crackle of hearths beginning to take over as the central focus of life. The inhabitants move more slowly now, deliberate in every gesture, winding down into rest while the cold presses against the walls, the snow, and the stillness outside. Daily chores, repeated with patience and attentiveness, are not merely functional. They shape perception, instill discipline, and create a sense of continuity. The cold dictates the rhythm, but the inhabitants respond with deliberate action, slow movement, and quiet reflection. Each task becomes a meditation, an exercise in presence, a small, intimate triumph over the demands of the environment. In these settlements, survival is not measured in grand events, but in the careful, unhurried execution of countless small acts, each one essential, each one a thread in the delicate fabric of life at the frozen edge of the world. In the coldest settlements, sustenance is both a necessity and a delicate art. The long winters stretch endlessly, snow blanketing the land for months, sometimes years, and the ground itself remains unyielding, frozen deep beneath the surface. Crops cannot grow, fruits cannot ripen, and hunting becomes both a skill and a gamble. Food is carefully preserved, rationed, and revered. Every meal is a quiet negotiation with scarcity, a meditation on patience, observation, and resourcefulness. The day begins with the preparation of provisions that have been stored for months. Furs and hides, drying in the warmth of the hearth, offer subtle scents of smoke and resin. Smoked fish and salted meat, carefully layered in boxes or hung from rafters, exude a concentrated aroma that speaks of preservation rather than freshness. The inhabitants move among these stores with a practiced touch, checking textures, listening for subtle shifts in the air that might indicate dampness or spoilage, adjusting arrangements to maintain safety and longevity. Each action is deliberate, slow, an expression of constant vigilance. Methods of preservation are learned through generations, a legacy of trial, error, and observation. Fish is gutted, cleaned, and hung over smoky fires, its texture gradually hardening, its flavors intensifying. Meat is salted and sometimes fermented in earthen pits lined with straw, creating sustenance that can survive the harshest months. Roots and herbs, though scarce, are dried carefully and stored in small bundles, releasing faint earthy aromas when handled. Each method balances science, instinct, and tradition, requiring precise timing, attention, and care. The process of preparing a meal is measured, almost ritualistic. Frozen water is slowly melted, snow transformed into liquid that will nourish both body and hearth. A portion of preserved meat is sliced thinly, each cut deliberate, considering both sustenance and rationing. Fish, dried and hardened, is softened in water or broth, its texture transformed gradually, a subtle miracle of patience and heat. Each movement is purposeful, embodying the understanding that food is precious, and that waste is not tolerated. Meals are modest, yet they carry profound significance. A bowl of broth thickened with preserved grains is savored slowly. The taste of smoked meat, tempered by time and fire, is deeply satisfying. The contrast of textures, the chew of dried roots, the softness of rehydrated fish, The warmth of liquid against a chilled mouth is heightened by the knowledge that every bite is earned, a product of careful labor and constant vigilance. Eating becomes an intimate engagement with the senses, a mindful act that reinforces connection to both the environment and the community. Scarcity shapes not only preparation but also movement and behavior. Hunting parties move with extreme caution, tracking animals across frozen plains, listening for the subtle signs of life beneath snow. Ice fishing requires patience, the quiet observation of water and ice, and precise timing to avoid waste or danger. Foraging is limited, a careful search for roots, mosses, and other sustenance, each discovery treated with reverence. These acts, though quiet, carry emotional weight. Success brings relief and gratitude. Failure brings the anxious tension of limited resources. Children are taught early to recognize scarcity, to understand the value of preserved food, and to contribute to its management. They assist in carrying small portions, arranging supplies, or tending drying racks. Their senses are attuned to smell, texture, and subtle visual cues. The gloss of a preserved fish, the stiffness of salted meat, the dryness of roots. These lessons, slow and immersive, embed the rhythms of survival into their memory, teaching patience, observation, and careful handling of resources. Preservation is also a sensory practice. The smell of smoke, salt, and drying herbs fills interiors, mingling with the warmth of hearths. The tactile engagement with food, slipping a dried fish from its twine, brushing frost from a root, kneading a small batch of preserved dough, anchors attention in the present. Even the sound of slicing or scraping against frozen surfaces reinforces the rhythm of preparation, the quiet dialogue between human effort and environmental constraints. Every gesture is deliberate, measured, and essential. Rationing is a constant, subtle discipline. Portions are calculated to stretch over days, sometimes weeks. Each meal is a balance between sustenance and prudence, the careful measurement of calories and energy against the uncertainty of future supply. Meals are not hurried. They are savored with awareness, reinforcing both physical nourishment and the psychological security of knowing that the next day will bring another measured portion. Scarcity is never openly lamented. It is understood, accepted, and quietly managed, shaping the community's behavior, rituals, and even relationships. The scarcity of food also fosters ingenuity. Preserved foods are combined in creative ways, dried meat softened in broth, roots and herbs layered for subtle flavor, small additions of fat or grains creating sustenance that is both satisfying and enduring. Techniques are shared across generations, refined slowly, with observation guiding adjustments. This quiet innovation ensures that even the most limited resources can be transformed into something sustaining, both physically and emotionally. Evening meals take on an added significance. As the light fades and the cold presses against walls, the warmth of the hearth and the presence of shared food create an intimate space. Conversations, though sparse, are rich with reflection. The act of eating together reinforces bonds, highlights the delicate balance of survival, and reminds all present of the continuous rhythm that governs life in these extreme conditions. The sensory richness, the warmth of fire, the aroma of preserved foods, the textures under fingers and tongue, creates a meditative, immersive experience, a quiet acknowledgement of life amidst adversity. Food in these settlements is therefore more than nourishment. It is a medium of continuity, memory, and resilience. Each preserved item embodies knowledge, care, and attention. Every meal is a reflection of countless small acts, hunting, gathering, drying, smoking, storing, that stretch across generations. Scarcity sharpens the senses, hones skill, and reinforces the meditative, patient approach to life that defines these settlements. By nightfall, food has been managed, portions distributed, and hearths warm. The inhabitants rest with a sense of quiet assurance, comforted by the rhythm of preparation and preservation. The cold, relentless outside is acknowledged but contained. Within the walls of the settlement, nourishment has been secured through deliberate effort, observation, and a deep understanding of environmental constraints. Survival here is measured not in abundance, but in the careful, patient orchestration of what little the land provides, a silent testament to human ingenuity, endurance, and the meditative rhythm of life at the frozen edge of the world. Beyond the clustered huts of the settlements lies a world of quiet, frozen expanses. Traveling across this terrain is not undertaken lightly. Every step is measured, every movement deliberate. The cold presses upon skin, penetrates layers of furs and wool, and demands attention with a persistent, almost tactile insistence. Even the act of walking becomes a meditation, each footfall a negotiation with snow, ice, and hidden obstacles beneath the pristine white surface. Paths between dwellings are narrow and compacted, formed over years of repeated travel. Beyond them, however, the snow lies deep, a deceptive uniformity that hides crevasses, ice-covered streams, and uneven terrain. Travelers must move slowly, testing each step, listening for subtle changes in the snow's texture. The crunch beneath boots is amplified, echoing softly across frozen plains, a rhythmic accompaniment to the careful pace. Mist may hang over the ground, obscuring shapes, softening edges, and demanding vigilance. Even a slight misstep can result in a fall, frostbite, or exposure to hidden dangers. The cold sharpens the senses. Eyes scan for faint traces, footprints of animals, the glint of ice, subtle shifts in shadow that indicate variations in terrain. Hands brush lightly against tree trunks, frozen ridges, or snow-laden rocks to gauge stability. Ears tune to the distant creak of ice, the faint whisper of wind against ridges, and the crunch of snow beneath other travelers. This heightened awareness, born of necessity, turns every journey into a slow, contemplative engagement with the land. Each step requires attention, each movement is deliberate, and the mind gradually enters a rhythm, aligning with the pace of the frozen world. Travel across ice-covered rivers carries its own quiet tension. The surface glimmers deceptively, sometimes solid, sometimes fragile. A careful tap of the foot, a weight shift, or the observation of tiny cracks and air bubbles becomes a critical measure of safety. Travelers adjust their stance, spreading weight evenly, testing the ice before committing fully. The sound of cracking or groaning ice is soft but alarming, a reminder of both vulnerability and the skill required to navigate safely. In these moments, silence is paramount, and the body moves with deliberate precision, attuned to the subtlest cues of the environment. Snow-laden forests offer a different challenge. Branches bow under the weight of ice, and movement is constrained by low-hanging limbs. The crunch of snow beneath boots is interspersed with the occasional snap of twigs, a sound amplified in the quiet of the winter landscape. Travelers weave carefully, adjusting to the uneven ground, testing for hidden roots or frozen water beneath the snow. Even here, observation dominates motion. The eyes follow patterns of animal tracks, the ears detect distant calls, and the body moves in concert with the rhythms of the forest, balancing caution with efficiency. Carrying supplies during travel requires additional awareness. Buckets of water, bundles of firewood, or provisions for the hearth must be managed carefully, lest weight destabilize movement. Hands, already numb from cold, work with deliberate focus to secure loads, distribute weight, and maintain balance. The rhythm of walking is punctuated by shifts in grip, pauses to steady oneself, and micro-adjustments to accommodate snow, ice, and wind. Even the act of breathing is measured, drawing cold air with attention, aware of its effect on lungs and energy. Animals, when present, require further adaptation. Sled dogs or domesticated reindeer may aid in travel, but they introduce subtle variations in movement. Reins and harnesses must be managed, weight distributed evenly, and interactions maintained with calm precision. The cold influences both human and animal behavior, and the traveler becomes an observer of instinct, patience, and cooperation. Each journey becomes a shared rhythm, a silent dialogue between species, the environment, and the observer. The wind itself is a persistent partner in movement. Gusts can push against the body, knocking one slightly off balance, chilling exposed skin and challenging even well-layered clothing. The direction and force of wind dictate pace, posture, and route. Travelers adjust instinctively, leaning into the gust, pressing against drifts, and using the contours of terrain for shelter. Movement across the frozen world is therefore an intimate engagement with elements beyond control, requiring observation, patience, and subtle negotiation. Travel also teaches a form of mental discipline. Each step demands focus, yet the rhythm of motion allows the mind to enter a quiet, reflective state. Thoughts slow, awareness sharpens, and the frozen world becomes both challenge and meditation. Travelers notice details often overlooked: the glint of sunlight on a snow-covered ridge, the faint imprint of an animal paw, the shimmer of hoarfrost along a branch. These observations provide both practical knowledge and emotional sustenance, connecting observer and environment in a continuous dialogue. Even brief pauses in travel are sensory experiences. Settlers may stop to rest, leaning against windswept stones, feeling the frost on their faces, listening to distant echoes, or watching snowflakes drift lazily in the muted light. Every inhalation fills the lungs with crisp, dry air. Every exhalation becomes visible, a fleeting cloud that disappears into the frozen landscape. These moments, though brief, reinforce awareness and patience, grounding travelers in the rhythm of movement, temperature, and survival. The journey itself shapes perception of distance and time. In the frozen world, miles seem longer and hours stretch thin. Movement is slowed by necessity, attention, and the tactile presence of snow, ice, and wind. Yet within this slow pace lies a contemplative richness. Travelers learn to read subtle environmental cues, anticipate changes, and attune themselves to the land's quiet signals. Every journey is an exercise in mindfulness, a meditation in endurance, and a rehearsal in patience. At day's end, the return to settlement is a relief and a quiet affirmation. The paths have been traversed with care, the body tested, and the mind sharpened. Supplies have been transported, animals tended, and observations noted. The snow-laden landscape remains formidable, but the rhythm of deliberate movement has transformed vulnerability into mastery, however subtle. Each journey reinforces skills, patience, and the meditative awareness required to exist in this extreme environment. Movement across the frozen world is therefore more than transportation. It is a practice of attentiveness, a meditation in motion, a slow negotiation with elements, terrain, and self. Travelers learn to move with grace, patience, and observation, internalizing lessons from every step. The frozen expanse, once imposing and indifferent, becomes a landscape of subtle guidance, a quiet partner in survival. And as the settlement comes into view at the day's end, with smoke rising from chimneys and the faint glow of hearths, the traveler carries not only supplies but a deeper, reflective understanding of life at the frozen edge. That each step, each pause, each deliberate motion is a quiet triumph over the relentless world beyond. In the frozen settlements, time is not counted by hours or minutes but by subtle shifts in the environment, small changes that signal the passage of day, season, and year. The sun moves slowly across a pale, clouded sky, its arc measured in soft, elongated shadows that stretch over snowdrifts and frozen rivers. Residents learn to read these shifts with patience and care, understanding that life in the coldest corners of the earth demands attentiveness to patterns, rather than reliance on instruments or schedules. Morning begins when the light changes imperceptibly, the first glow touching rooftops, walls, and snow-covered paths. It is a quiet emergence, not sudden or bright, but gradual, a gentle illumination that colors the landscape in muted blues, grays, and silver. Breath becomes visible in the air, mingling with faint smoke rising from chimneys, marking the start of activity without words or bells. The subtlety of these cues teaches observation, a slow attunement to environment and rhythm. Temperature, too, is a measure of time. Frost on windows and rooftops shifts slowly. Icicles lengthen and drip with incremental warmth. Snow softens and hardens in response to sun and wind. Inhabitants note these changes unconsciously: when to melt snow for water, when to stoke the fire more vigorously, when to tend animals or harvest hidden stores. The body itself becomes an instrument, responding to the gradual decrease or increase in cold, adjusting metabolism, movement, and clothing in a dialogue with the environment. Daily routines are aligned with these subtle cues. Morning chores, feeding animals, tending fires, checking provisions, begin with first light. Midday tasks, repairing structures, gathering supplies, or moving across the frozen terrain, follow the sun's arc and the relative warmth it provides. Evening descends slowly, not marked by clocks, but by the soft lengthening of shadows, the fading of light, and the subtle intensification of cold. The transition is gradual, creating a rhythm that is internalized, a natural cadence woven into every action. The seasons themselves unfold imperceptibly. Winter dominates the landscape with extended darkness, harsh winds, and deep snow. Spring emerges not suddenly, but in the delicate lengthening of days, the softening of ice, and the faint trickle of thawing water. Each change is observed with patience: the first buds in hidden valleys, the return of migratory birds, or the subtle shift in wind direction. Time is understood through these environmental signals rather than abstract measurement, creating a profound connection between the inhabitants and the natural world. Even the passage of years is marked subtly. Layers of snow accumulate, then partially melt. Repeated freezes leave patterns in ice and stone. Seasonal stores of food wax and wane. Objects, structures, and paths carry the imprint of multiple cycles, allowing inhabitants to perceive longevity and history in physical form. Generations grow up attuned to these patterns, understanding time not as a linear abstraction but as a continuous negotiation with environment, survival, and human labor. Observing shadows becomes an essential practice. Low-angle sunlight casts elongated silhouettes that shift imperceptibly throughout the day. The inhabitants learn to judge time by these movements, predicting when tasks must begin or end, when to rest, and when to prepare for changing conditions. Even the color of the light, soft golds, muted blues, pale grays, provides cues, guiding action with a subtlety impossible to convey in words but entirely legible to those attuned to it. Sound, too, carries temporal signals. The wind changes pitch and intensity over hours, birds call at intervals that mark seasonal patterns, and the ice creaks differently as temperatures fluctuate. Even footsteps on snow, the shifting of firewood, or the distant rumble of snow-laden branches convey subtle information about timing, energy, and rhythm. The inhabitants cultivate a kind of intimate chronometry, blending auditory, visual, and tactile observations into a nuanced understanding of the day's flow. Rituals and routines reinforce this perception. Meals, tending fires, and chores are not dictated by clocks but by light, temperature, and subtle shifts in wind or snow. Children learn this rhythm early, moving alongside elders who demonstrate when a task should begin, when it may pause, and when it must end. Over time, the body and mind internalize these cues, creating a quiet, meditative sense of time that is both precise and fluid, rooted in observation and experience rather than abstract counting. The perception of time also shapes emotional life. Moments stretch or contract depending on activity, awareness, and environmental conditions. A morning spent melting snow and feeding animals may feel long, full of detailed observation, while a brief walk across a frozen plain may expand into a meditation on patience and endurance. Even boredom or waiting, often unavoidable in such harsh conditions, becomes an exercise in attentiveness, a slow, reflective engagement with the subtle cues of the world. Nightfall brings the most pronounced change, though it too is gradual. The light fades softly, the wind shifts and temperatures drop incrementally. Smoke from hearths thickens in the air, tracing faint, curling patterns against darkened skies. Inside, the flicker of firelight marks the passage of time through warmth, shadow, and comfort. Tasks conclude not with urgency but in deliberate closure, allowing inhabitants to reflect on the day's rhythms, adjustments, and small triumphs over the cold. In these settlements, the measurement of time is inseparable from survival. Observation, patience, and attentiveness to subtle environmental cues allow inhabitants to navigate not only daily life but seasonal cycles and long-term planning. Time becomes a lived experience, sensed through frost, light, shadow, and sound rather than abstract hours or minutes. The inhabitant's existence is embedded within this temporal rhythm, each action harmonizing with the slow, deliberate cadence of the frozen world. By recognizing time in its subtle forms, inhabitants cultivate a quiet mastery over their environment. They anticipate changes in temperature, prepare for shifting light, and coordinate labor with the rhythm of the land. This awareness fosters both practical efficiency and emotional steadiness, creating a life attuned to natural cycles and reflective of deep, patient observation. Survival here is measured not in immediate victories, but in the alignment of human activity with the enduring, subtle measures of time. The frozen world teaches humility and attentiveness, revealing that time is neither fast nor slow, but a continuous meditative flow. Inhabitants learn to inhabit this flow, to align movement, work, and rest with environmental cues, and to internalize the subtle sensory markers of change. Life at the frozen edge is thus governed by quiet observation, patient labor, and a rhythm that integrates body, mind, and environment. Each day, measured in light, shadow, frost, and wind, becomes an immersive meditation on the passage of time, a reflection of endurance, awareness, and the delicate balance of survival in the coldest settlements on Earth. In the frozen settlements, survival is not only a matter of individual skill but of quiet interdependence. The extreme cold, the scarcity of resources, and the subtle rhythms of daily life demand collaboration, observation, and trust. Each person contributes to the collective endurance, and bonds are formed not through grand gestures, but through shared routines, small acts of care, and the continuous, almost imperceptible attention to one another's needs. The day begins with familiar, coordinated rhythms. Neighbors exchange small gestures, a shared log placed by a doorway, a basket of provisions quietly delivered, or a glance confirming that animals are fed and fires stoked. These acts, though seemingly minor, carry profound significance. Each gesture affirms connection, reinforces awareness of each other's presence, and ensures that the fragile balance of survival is maintained. In the cold, small attentions become essential, and the quiet cooperation of the community becomes a form of warmth, both literal and emotional. Children learn these bonds early. They move between homes, carrying messages or assisting with chores, their presence both supervised and trusted. They observe patterns of behavior: who tends fires efficiently, who navigates the snow with confidence, who knows when to fetch water before the ice becomes treacherous. Through repetition and quiet observation, children internalize the rhythms of communal life, learning that survival depends not only on individual effort but on synchronized care, attentiveness, and the subtle reciprocity that governs relationships in such a demanding environment. Adults coordinate activities with an unspoken understanding. Tasks are divided with patience and efficiency. One person tends animals while another repairs structures. One fetches water while another monitors food stores. Instructions are often conveyed through gestures or brief words, leaving silence as the dominant mode of interaction. This silence is not emptiness but attentiveness, a shared awareness of surroundings, of tasks, and of each other's labor. The cold amplifies the need for this attentiveness. Miscommunication can have consequences, and so harmony is cultivated quietly, with careful observation and mutual respect. Even routine chores become opportunities for connection. When tending fires together, the placement of logs, the movement of coals, or the distribution of fuel is coordinated with subtle glances or small, efficient gestures. While repairing roofs or walls, shared effort ensures safety, stability, and efficiency. The rhythm of work itself fosters a meditative synchronization, a quiet dialogue in which bodies, hands, and attention align with both environment and community. In these acts, the inhabitants experience both physical and emotional reinforcement. The knowledge that others are present, skilled, and attentive provides reassurance and resilience. Food, always precious, serves as a focal point for communal bonds. Portions are often prepared and distributed with care, ensuring that no one suffers unnecessarily. Those with surplus may share discreetly. Those in need learn to observe and trust the generosity embedded in subtle exchanges. Meals, eaten in proximity to the hearth, reinforce connection through shared warmth and quiet acknowledgement. Even in scarcity, these small acts of mutual care create a sense of continuity and belonging that complements physical survival with emotional sustenance. The exchange of knowledge is another vital bond. Elders pass down subtle skills, how to read frost patterns, track animals, preserve food, or navigate treacherous terrain. These lessons are conveyed in quiet demonstration rather than lecture, observed and practiced slowly by younger generations. The community thus becomes a living archive, a repository of survival knowledge encoded in gestures, movements, and repeated, mindful practice. Learning is immersive, sensory, and reflective, grounded in experience rather than abstraction. The physical layout of the settlement also fosters these bonds. Huts are clustered for mutual protection. Narrow pathways limit exposure to wind, and shared spaces like communal drying racks or wells encourage interaction while remaining functional. Observation of neighbors' routines provides cues for timing, prioritization, and caution. The settlement itself is both shelter and teacher, structuring movement, attention, and connection in ways that maintain harmony, security, and resilience. Seasonal changes intensify reliance on community. In the depths of winter, when snow accumulates and light wanes, collective effort ensures that paths remain passable, provisions are rationed wisely, and animals survive. Inhabitants move with heightened awareness of each other, communicating through gestures, glances, or brief exchanges. Trust and attentiveness are essential, for any lapse can endanger life. These shared struggles cultivate quiet bonds, a collective rhythm that sustains both physical survival and emotional steadiness. Even leisure, though rare, reinforces connection. Observing the subtle beauty of the environment, icicles glinting in faint light, snowdrifts sculpted by wind, the distant silhouette of mountains, becomes a shared experience when done in pairs or small groups. Conversation, though sparse, focuses on observations, reflections, or practical concerns. Humor is gentle, restrained, often arising from shared knowledge or small triumphs. The cold imposes intimacy, slowing interaction and fostering deliberate, mindful engagement with both environment and companion. During extreme weather, bonds are most apparent. Blizzards, deep freezes, or sudden storms necessitate collective vigilance. Huts are reinforced, fires monitored, and supplies distributed. Actions are coordinated with minimal words, each person moving with awareness of the others, positions, tasks, and intentions. This synchronization creates a quiet confidence. Each knows that others are attentive, capable, and reliable. The community becomes an extension of the self, a protective network woven through shared experience, patience, and calm observation. Even after danger passes, the effects linger subtly. The rhythm of chores, meals, and fire tending resumes, but there is an underlying awareness of shared endurance. Observing neighbors' careful movements, noticing small acts of care, or reflecting on collective effort strengthens bonds quietly, embedding resilience not only in routines but in memory and perception. Each day reinforces the interdependence essential for survival, emphasizing patience, attentiveness, and the meditative quality of communal life. In these settlements, bonds are not declared but lived. They are expressed in the silent choreography of labor, the attentive distribution of resources, and the careful observation of one another's needs. Community is an integral part of survival, a slow, immersive practice of trust, cooperation, and shared awareness. Life here is measured not only by individual endurance, but by the quiet, persistent rhythm of collective care, in which each gesture, glance, and action contributes to the fragile equilibrium of existence at the frozen edge of the world. The cold, in essence, enforces empathy. Awareness of vulnerability fosters attentiveness, observation cultivates care, and the rhythm of shared labor builds resilience. The inhabitants live not in isolation, but in an intricate, silent network of dependence, understanding that their survival is inseparable from that of their neighbors. In this way, community becomes both shelter and sustenance, a subtle yet enduring warmth that persists even in the harshest conditions. In the coldest settlements on Earth, the human body is constantly tested. Frost bites, illness, and fatigue are silent threats, creeping into life with quiet persistence. Survival requires not only warmth, sustenance, and shelter, but careful attention to the delicate balance of physical health. Each day, the inhabitants navigate this balance with deliberate mindfulness, observing subtle signs, adjusting habits, and relying on both traditional knowledge and intuition. Morning routines often begin with checks on one's own body and those of family members. Fingers, toes, and exposed skin are inspected for early signs of frostbite. A flushed cheek or pale lip may indicate cold stress. Children are observed closely. Their energy, responsiveness, and comfort level guide adjustments in clothing, food intake, or activity. Even small details, shivering patterns, uneven breathing, or slight stiffness in joints carry significance, prompting immediate response. Attention is constant, subtle, and meditative. Illness in these settlements moves quietly but demands swift recognition. Respiratory infections, frostbite complications, and digestive troubles can become dangerous when compounded by cold, scarcity, and limited mobility. Traditional remedies, passed down through generations, are relied upon with care. Herbs, broths, and poultices are prepared with precision, their effectiveness enhanced by timing, dosage, and observation. Heat, both from fires and physical proximity, is administered thoughtfully, becoming both medicine and comfort. These practices are slow, deliberate, and rhythmically integrated into daily life, reflecting an intimate knowledge of human resilience and vulnerability. Physical labor itself is a form of health maintenance. Chopping wood, gathering water, tending fires, and moving across snow are not only chores but subtle exercises in endurance, strength, and balance. Each movement engages muscles, stimulates circulation, and encourages metabolic activity. The body adapts gradually to the environment, internalizing patterns of exertion, rest, and recovery. Even the act of careful walking over ice or snow strengthens stabilizing muscles, training the body in ways both functional and meditative. Nutrition plays a central role in resilience. Preserved foods, carefully rationed and thoughtfully prepared, supply essential sustenance. Salted meat provides protein, dried roots and herbs provide vitamins, fats and grains supply energy against the relentless cold. Each meal is eaten with awareness, a meditative recognition of its role in sustaining both life and capability. Overconsumption is avoided, undernutrition mitigated through careful planning, and the timing of meals coordinated with activity to maximize physical and emotional endurance. Hygiene, too, is subtly integrated into survival. The cold complicates washing, but routines are maintained with care. Snow may be melted for cleansing, heated stones used for warming water, and simple rituals of brushing, airing clothing, and cleaning tools preserve health and prevent minor infections from becoming serious. These actions are performed slowly, attentively, and with awareness of both body and environment, reinforcing resilience through deliberate care. The mind is as important as the body. Isolation, harsh conditions, and long winters can tax mental endurance. Quiet reflection, observation of subtle environmental changes, and immersion in routine provide structure, stability, and calm. Daily rhythms of chores, fire tending, movement, and community interaction support mental resilience, allowing inhabitants to remain patient, focused, and emotionally steady. Small rituals, listening to the wind, observing shadows, noting subtle color changes in snow and ice, anchor attention and create a meditative engagement with the world. When illness or injury occurs, recovery is methodical. Rest is prioritized, warmth is maintained, nutrition adjusted to promote healing. Community support is subtle but constant. Neighbors assist with tasks, provide food and warmth, and maintain vigilance over the affected individual. Recovery is not hurried, and each day's progress is observed with attention, reinforcing patience and endurance. In this way, resilience is cultivated not only in prevention but in careful, deliberate response to adversity. Adaptation becomes a lifelong skill. Bodies acclimate to cold. Habits evolve to optimize warmth, nutrition, and activity. Movements adjust to avoid injury. Elders demonstrate these patterns with quiet mastery, their experience embodied in posture, gestures, and subtle adjustments to routines. Children internalize these lessons gradually, learning that health is a continuous negotiation with environment, labor, and community. Knowledge of the body, careful observation, and patient adaptation are inseparable from survival. Even the smallest details matter. A misplaced layer of clothing can chill an extremity. A delayed meal can sap strength. A moment of inattention can exacerbate fatigue or frostbite. Awareness is constant, integrating sensory input, environmental cues, and bodily feedback into decisions that sustain life. This attentive rhythm, slow, immersive, and deeply connected to the land, defines the inhabitants' approach to both health and survival. At night, the body rests in layers, insulated from cold and wind. Fires are maintained at optimal warmth. Children sleep close to adults. Animals provide additional heat and reassurance. Sleep itself is a carefully protected practice, essential to both physical repair and mental stability. The rhythm of the day, structured by chores, meals, movement, and observation, culminates in this restorative period, reinforcing endurance, awareness, and resilience. In these settlements, health is a continuous meditative practice. It is observed in the smallest signs: the brightness of eyes, the color of skin, the warmth of fingers, and the steadiness of movement. It is maintained through labor, nutrition, hygiene, and attention, and it is reinforced by the community's quiet bonds. Each inhabitant becomes both guardian and observer of their own body and that of their neighbors, creating a network of care that underpins survival. Resilience emerges not in dramatic triumphs but in the sustained, careful orchestration of daily life. Every action, feeding animals, tending fires, preparing meals, moving across snow, observing changes in weather, or adjusting clothing, contributes to the ongoing negotiation with environment and circumstance. Survival is measured in subtle mastery, patient adaptation, and continuous attentiveness, forming a rhythm that integrates body, mind, and community. As the day concludes, the inhabitants rest with calm assurance. They have survived, yet the challenges of cold, scarcity, and isolation remain. Health and resilience are ongoing practices, nurtured by observation, patience, and deliberate action. The frozen world demands respect, attentiveness, and endurance, and those who live here learn to meet its quiet, persistent challenges with a meditative, immersive rhythm. Each day survived is a small triumph. Each winter endured is a testament to human patience, ingenuity, and the delicate, sustained art of life at the coldest settlements on Earth.